Welcome to 50 Chairs, the show about the courage it takes to start something new and the builders who see a future before anyone else does. I'm your host, Gary Hensley. My guest today spent years inside the classified world of intelligence and then made a bold decision to take the tools that governments use to understand threats and forecast the future and put them in the hands of everyday people. Anthony Vinci is the CEO of Vico.io and the author of The Fourth Intelligence Revolution. We talk about deception, artificial intelligence, forecasting what comes next, and what it really takes to build a company around an idea most people think is impossible. Let's get into it. Awesome. We are live on 50 Chairs with Anthony. Anthony, so excited to have you today, man. As we were talking right before the podcast started, 50 Chairs is a story of my dad starting a church, but really the underlying story is the courage that it takes to start something new. And as I got to know you a little bit and got introduced kind of the work that you're doing, man, I got to bet there's been no shortage of 50 chair moments where you said, hey, man, there's this world that I've been living inside the government that I could bring outside into the real world and have people use on a day-to-day basis. And I'm excited to share what you're doing at Vico. And for the audience, I've had a chance to play around with it. I won't tell the story now, but it's pretty cool what Anthony's doing, Anthony and team. But I want to start the audience off in a scene. And the scene's this. You've written a book, The Fourth Intelligence. You were the CTO of the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, which I didn't even know that was an agency, working inside of the government. And then at some point you realize what I'm doing inside the government doesn't have to stay there. I can make a product around that. Walk me through that moment where either that was a progression or that was a light bulb moment, but walk me through that moment where you said, hey, there's something here that I can do outside the world, and what happened next?
When you become an intelligence officer, you sort of abide by sort of the Fight Club rule, like you just don't talk about Fight Club, and your whole life becomes compartmented and secret, and you get a security clearance, and you're not allowed to tell many people even what you do. And those people you can tell, maybe your wife or something like this, you can't get into any level of detail. Literally, when you go to work in the morning, if you can kind of picture this, like you park in the parking lot, you have to remove all of your cell phones, any form of electronics. You have to leave them in your car, leave them in a locker. You walk through kind of a security checkpoint. That just gets you into the building. Then you go up to now to get into your office, you go through another security door that's only some people can go into. And then you're in your office and then maybe working on something that even people in that office aren't allowed to see. So like the guy sitting next to you is not allowed to see or know about the thing you're working on your computer on. Like that's the world of layers of security and compartmentalization that you're in. And so trust me, the last thing on your mind when you're in there is, hey, why don't I just open this up for the whole world to use? Right? That is not a normal thought to have. Your normal thought is to sit around being like, how can I make this even more secure?
Yeah.
But you sort of, what really dawned on me at some point is that what we were doing in there, in intelligence agencies, people outside of those agencies needed to be able to do as well. Right? That maybe you're running a business and your business is actually now threatened by some of the similar threats that I was worried about as an intelligence officer. Right? Maybe you run a business, a high-tech business of some sort, making AI, something like this. Your IP might be stolen by the same people I was worried about, say by Chinese hackers working for the Chinese Communist Party, right? Or you're a hedge fund and you're trading on oil and you're worried about, how war in Iran and what the Iranians might do would affect your trades. Or you're a regular person, just with a family, and I have a son, and I literally thought about it this way. I'm worried that my son might be influenced by censorship or even information operations on TikTok or other platforms, which is a real thing that's happening. And I realized those people needed the tools that I had, literally access to similar types of information, similar types of analysis. And they needed it for their livelihoods, but even for themselves as people to operate and not be threatened in some way. And that really was the driving force where I was like, I need to take what we're doing inside here in this highly secret, highly compartmented world and bring it out and put it in the hands of regular everyday people and businesses. And that was really what dawned on me when I was in there.
Wow. When you and I got a chance to talk before, we were talking about how the world, when you hear intelligence officer, like the first thing that comes to mind for most people is like, Jason Bourne or James Bond. But the work that you're doing is a little different than that, right? Like you were working at the National Geospatial-Intelligence, which again, I don't even know where that sits in the government alphabet soup. It was the first time hearing about it when you and I chatted. But what were you seeing in there that most people miss, that you're like, it feels like when you see those movies, it's like, oh yeah, that happens in movies. This isn't the real world. This is just Hollywood or kind of pretend. And then the more I've gotten to know the kind of veteran community and intelligence officers over time, they're like, no. The things that you're hearing about, these are real. These are real threats that are happening. So what were you seeing that most people kind of don't see that you can share?
When I started, I was a case officer, which is that kind of field job, right? It's not like Jason Bourne and James Bond, like those are fictionalized, right? But
Yeah.
I was out there, was out on the street in Baghdad and places like that, finding sources of information and recruiting them and collecting information, which went to the government and with a gun and everything, frankly, right? Like that, there was that world, and so you learn to start to think about threat in a different way and security in a different way. And that's what it is to think like an intelligence officer, to think about operational security. And then I came back, I left intelligence. I came back as the chief technology officer at NGA. And to your point, not a lot of people realize it's not just the CIA. It's everything, right? There are 19 different intelligence community agencies that are involved or offices within other agencies and departments, and they all do different things. NGA, its job is to take satellite imagery and other geospatial intelligence, like from drones and things like this, and analyze it and use that. So, think the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? The Soviets have placed missiles in Cuba, and there's somebody looking at, a U-2 image and seeing and literally pointing and saying, no, that's a missile, and that's a problem, right? That's what these guys do every day, and they do it in a world where now there's a lot of nuclear weapons and there's a lot of missiles and things like this. So they do an amazing job, and they're really necessary for our security. But when I was in there, you learn kind of two things that I thought were really transferable and really poignant, and that everybody really should know about. One is that sometimes there's a bad guy on the other side of information. Like there is deception. A lot of us, we get on a cell phone or something, we think, yeah, maybe there's just like, maybe the AI that I'm using, I'm on a chatbot or something, it's just like wrong. But really what happens is sometimes there's a bad person that's feeding you information, and there is deception in the. And we all kind of learn this as kids, like that there are criminals, right? That somebody might steal my bicycle or somebody might lie to me and try to rip me off or something. But you start to really understand that when you're an intelligence officer, that there are people who are good at this. They're not just criminals, they're paid by governments, and they try to do this. The other thing that I realized, and which I think even many intelligence officers haven't realized, and what I essentially wrote a book about, the Fourth Intelligence Revolution, is that sometimes those bad guys, those spies in foreign countries, those people doing my kind of job, but in China or Russia or Iran and North Korea, they're not just preying on people like me, like an intelligence officer or a senator or a general. Sometimes they're preying on regular people because they have realized that the soft underbelly of America is regular citizens, and that citizens in America vote for our leaders. This is not generally the case. Even if there are elections like in Russia, they're kind of rigged or unfair in some way. That we are the people who kind of control our government, and that the real cornerstone of American power is our economy, and that's what gives us real power. And so when those countries want to prey upon America, they realize they can't stand, up against us militarily, right? Even China, even the second largest military in the world, is not going to invade America. It's just impossible. But they can come after our businesses. They can come after voters. Mm. And so I started to look at the world as not only is there a bad guy and there's deception, but this affects businesses because now businesses are part of the competition. It affects regular people because voters are part of the competition for them. And I think that people need to start to understand this and start to look at the world through a new lens. And that lens is the lens I have, an intelligence officer lens. And once you start to look at it, it's almost like, taking the pill in the Matrix. You now see the world for what it is, right? And you're like, all of a sudden things start adding up. And you're like, you hear on the news about, a hack of insurance records or banking records. And you're like, oh, I see. They're trying to collect that information so they can understand maybe voters and try to change their views or why TikTok matters. Oh, I see. They're trying to censor information to an entire generation of Americans, right? That's why these things start to matter. And that lens helps you understand the world.
Wow. So many threads to kind of go down on that. I'll start as kind of the parent. 'Cause you said you have your son, I have 3 kids. And, the idea of teaching your kid to have an intelligence officer view for some might seem like extreme, but from what I can understand, and you can tell me differently, is it's a skill you can learn. It's maybe one of many skills that you might want to have and lens that you can put on the world. What is transferable in that kind of, not in the job, but in the way you think about the world? And have you used that as a dad with your kid?
Yeah. We all sort of do this as parents, right? You, even from a young age, you say, don't leave your bike out on the sidewalk overnight because somebody might take it, right? Kids learn this very early, right? They understand that there are criminals in the world, right? And they understand actually that people lie, like really early, right? Like kindergarten, first grade, right? They understand that like there are liars, right? It's like part of growing up. And we've actually done this for a whole nation with cybersecurity, right? Like 40 years ago, nobody really knew. Most people didn't know what cybersecurity was, right? Like if you even use that word, you probably wouldn't understand. But now, trust me, if you go to any 8-year-old in America and you ask them to use the iPad, they're going to know there's a password on the iPad, right? Like,
Yeah.
We have sort of taught this to everyone that like you can secure your device, right? That you can secure your phone and your iPad and your computer. And eventually that you secure it because, by the way, there might be hackers, right? There might be, it's not just that I want to keep you out of the iPad because you're only allowed to use it once a day for, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's also that, hey, we do this because if somebody was to get this, we don't want them to have our credit cards or things like this. Well, it's the same for information, and it should be, right? That, like I was saying, there could be deceptive actors, bad guys on the other side of information that are changing information on purpose to make you think differently about something, or that are trying to steal your information to prey upon you or your business, right? If you run a business, but let's just say you're an individual. And I think the same goes for children. that a lot of kids like my son's age are on YouTube and they're watching videos. And sometimes, look, you have to teach your kids sometimes to be really careful on YouTube just from criminals, right? There are predators and so forth. So you're teaching them that. But also that there could be other types of predators, right? Like that there could be, other deceptive actors who want them to believe something, who want them to go down certain paths, right? And vote certain ways. And it's, and that I think we can kind of teach these skills to help them understand that. And there's a few that we can teach that are, you kind of learn as an intelligence officer. And that's why I use the phrase, we all do this maybe at some instinctual level, but you can be explicit, right? One, you can look at the world and understand that through this lens, that there are deceptive actors. And then two, that you can do something to see through that deception. You can triangulate information. You see a YouTube video about one subject, go check another YouTube video or a newspaper or something else and see a different view, right? This is just good advice in general in life, but is really helpful for this. Two, that you can actually test sources of information. Somebody's telling you something on a news site. Well, you can go check that out. You can even go buy satellite imagery, for example, commercially, and see what's really going on in that part of the world. You can go to a direct source, right? And that's something you learn to do as an intelligence officer, right? So you can start to sort of actively consume information. And I think thinking about it as kind of like I'm a mini intelligence officer. I'm someone who is sort of that there are these bad guys in the world and I need to be careful and I need to actively process it and sort of think like James Bond would think.
Yeah.
That is a good way, and you can do it in an age-appropriate way. And it could be fun. Like, hey, why don't we think? Most kids haven't seen James Bond actually anymore, but they've seen something, right? Like that's similar.
Yeah.
And we can kind of teach that in an age-appropriate way. And then as they get older, can do it more formally, right? By the time you're in high school, you can do this, for real. And then later in life, you can continue to learn.
I love that perspective. As parents that are listening to this, I think that what I'm hearing a lot is people talking about AI. And I saw that, you started back in 2017 and AI really didn't reach consciousness of most Americans or the world really until about, 3 years ago. And then it's like there's before and after, right? And so in the world of AI, I feel like this has become increasingly important because it is so easy to produce information. It's so easy to produce videos and images, and they look real. And so you had been watching this, I'm assuming, like you were aware of where AI was coming. I had a guest on early days who was at MIT's lab for the Air Force, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, we knew about this way before." What were you seeing internally that made you kind of say, "Okay, this is a useful tool"? And then where do you think that's going? That you say maybe it's going in a direction I didn't anticipate.
Yeah, part of my role at NGA was to actually find new AI and bring it into that agency, and I did this also partially for the Pentagon as well, as part of something called Project Maven at the time. And what we realized at that time was that, and this is almost 10 years ago now, so it was before LLMs really had come out, before ChatGPT and Claude and all of those, and we realized that two things. One was that AI could do what people did. So it could do what an analyst did. And that's what I was working on, which was I could use AI, computer vision, which is a form of AI, to identify what was on these satellite images, which helps us secure the nation, right? Like it spots that missile, like in the Cuban Missile Crisis. But now it can look everywhere in the world all at once rather than having to have a person. But the other thing is what you're saying, that AI can fake things and it can be really hard to see through that. And that got turbocharged after the release of these powerful LLM models. And we've all seen it, right? We've all seen these images, these videos that are completely realistic looking, where somebody has faked a real person, a president or something like that. And it even purposely made it maybe look grainy or like it was taken, on some cell phone, right? Like they're that good at it, right? And that's a brave new world for all of us. It used to be possible to do that. Like Mao and Stalin would take photos and literally have painters change the photo and paint over it and do things like this. But that took lots of people, right? Like that used to be a whole production. Now you can be a 16-year-old on an AI system and do it yourself. Which means that, if a 16-year-old could do that, imagine what a criminal enterprise or a government can do. And they can not only change an image at a time, they can change millions of them. And in fact, there's something called LLM grooming, which I've written an op-ed about, where what you do is you create whole, hundreds of thousands or even millions of news stories that are just made up, that you use AI to create, and you push those out onto the internet. And those news stories then those news stories aren't targeted at you and I. They're targeted at the chatbots. They're targeted at ChatGPT or Claude or whoever, right? And then now those chatbots think that's real. They think it's real news. So when you or I go ask our chatbot, hey, what's going on in this part of the world? It gives us that poisoned information. So it's doubly fake, right? You can fake the actual thing, but you can also fake out the chatbot, and then the chatbot reports to you. So what this amounts to is we're sort of entering a world where literally anything could be faked at any time and you don't know who to trust. And now we're back to, okay, what do you do in that world? And this is where I say, you've got to now start to look at the world through these lenses, right, of an intelligence officer, of somebody with training like me, and learn how to see the world that way and have that skepticism about information and have those tools ready for how do you make sense and find truth in that world.
Yeah, this idea of truth has been talked about a lot lately. What is truth? Not only in terms of like your identity, like can you prove who you actually, are? Can you prove the skills that you have? It's becoming increasingly harder to find that. And, as you were going through and seeing that evolution happen in the market, where was Vico in your head on this? Is it a source of truth? Is it a way to see the world? Kind of if we were to take all of the things that Anthony learned during those times and said, let me put that worldview and into a tool. Is that what I experienced on Vico?
When you take a step back and you think about intelligence, really what it's about, it's not even about truth or information. It's about making better decisions, right? So I would go out in Baghdad and collect information, right, on what was going on, say, with an insurgency. But that wasn't that was a means. That was not the ends. The end was that a general or president somewhere back in Washington could make a better decision about what to do. That's what intelligence officers really do, right? Is you're getting information, you're analyzing information so that somebody else can make a better decision. And maybe that's whether to know that a war might happen, and so to send troops to defend yourself. Maybe that's to send, law enforcement to stop a terrorist attack, right? Like you're making these decisions. And that's really what I realized with Vico that was lacking in the world is, if you're a president or if you're a billionaire or a CEO of a company, you have all these people who can help you make better decisions. But, what kind of tools could I provide that would help people make better decisions, without having the CIA at their, at their beck and call,
disposal.
right? Right. And that's really what we built. And the way that we did that, the road into that was to say, well, one great way to help you make a decision is if you could understand what's going to happen better, what might happen, if you could forecast the future better, right? Because if you can know that this or that is more or less likely, now you can kind of take a step back and you can think to yourself, okay, what's the real probability of this happening? And I can give you that probability. Now you can make that decision. And that might be you're at a hedge fund and you want to buy, sell, or hold a stock, or it might be that you're at a company and you want to decide, is this the right time for me to to open up a new store in this place? It might be that you're a regular person and you're, deciding, is this the right time to travel to a city? And so that's where we started. And then since then, we've built a whole series of decision tools to kind of help you evaluate, based on what might happen in the future, what is my best decision today? Of all of the options I have, what are the best decisions I could?
So when you started looking at, hey, I think there's a product here. There's always this moment, I feel like, in every founder's head where you're like, man, I really do think there's something here. And then you tell somebody, you say, and I don't know what your pitch was the first time you said it, but I'm imagining maybe it was something like, I think there's a way to provide like personal intelligence to help people make better decisions and in some way kind of predict the future. And I can imagine someone like not coming from your world or, a friend hearing that and saying, that sounds crazy, Anthony. Like, is that real? Is that possible? What was that moment like? Like, did people hear what you were doing and say, I think that's crazy and like, that's impossible. You couldn't possibly predict the future.
Yeah, it does sound crazy. You're right. And I knew it was kind of crazy at the time. And my co-founder and I, at first we're just trying to say, can we better assess what's going on, right? Can we do what an analyst does, which is a little less science fiction. But as we started doing that, it said, I was literally like, should we try to forecast something, right? And I'm literally thinking about science fiction, about like if you've read the Foundation books by Asimov, I'm literally thinking about that. I'm like, could there actually be psychohistory? Could we have a system that forecasts? And if you think about it, people do this. I actually, 20 years ago, worked for a guy, Alfred Toffler, and he was kind of a futurist, and he wrote a book called Future Shock, which is a great read. Still, it's like a 56-year-old book now, but it's still a great way to think about the future. And like we as people we do forecast things all the time, right? You just do it kind of naturally. But I was like, could we do it better than people, right? Could we sort of create a forecaster? Could we create a futurist that was better than what people do? And that did feel a little crazy. And then we tried it out. We literally, I think this is how the world works now. When you have a startup, you just got to go out and build it. Just try to do it. Just like make that alpha. And we did it. Like we literally made one and we just started running this thing. And then we forecasted the strikes on Iran by Israel and then the US last in 2025. So the first round of strikes, a week out. And I saw it. I saw the forecast and I was like, all right, this seems like a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's like a really high conviction. And so I went and bought some oil futures just to, some oil ETFs just to prove it. And then it happened. And that's where I was like, oh my God, this is really working. And that's where then, we went through that process and we made that deck to start to show investors. And literally like the first slide is a quote from Isaac Asimov from Foundation. So it really was that. And then, the first thing people ask you when you say you can predict the future is they're just like, show me.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, prove it to me. And so then, then you get into like the nitty gritty, like how do you show that you can do it and statistically and all of these things. But that's the path we went down. But it still feels like the future to me. And in fact, I still today, I feel like I'm a person who knows a lot about how the world works, like geopolitics. Like I have a PhD in international relations. I was like literally an intelligence officer. Like I feel like, a bit of an expert on this stuff, right? There are people who have more expertise than me, but like I consider myself knowing a lot. I actually now am at a point where I trust the Vico model, more than my own instincts about what will happen in the world. Like it's that much of a flip. I go to the model first. I'm like, is this really going to happen?
Wow. And I had a chance to use it and it was kind of fun because it's like, what would you do if you could predict the future? Like and then you're like, well, what would I do? what are the questions I would ask? And so I sat with a friend, and he's in finance, and of course, his brain went directly to, where's the economy going and things like that, you know, and it was amazing how useful it was in terms of giving you some comfort over those decisions, saying, okay, maybe I should hold off, or maybe I should lean into this, and so having that ability on your screen and available to the world, I think is such a gift. And so I'm excited for the future of Vico. But, what is what is your hope for it? Like when you, as founders, I say you give birth to something, you're putting something that didn't exist into the world. Where do you hope this goes for Vico? How do you hope people use it?
Yeah, I think about it like this, when you can understand the future a little bit better, you can make a better decision, right?
Yeah.
And making better decisions, just like net positive for people and communities and the world, right? Like think about intelligence agencies. A lot of people in their mind, because we all watch movies and, we see James Bond or Jason Bourne, we think about intelligence agencies as something that like, I don't know, you use in a war or win a war or something. Actually,
Yeah.
what intelligence agencies do is they keep you out of war. That's really what they're there for, right? Is to know what's going to happen, to give a decision maker time and space for a decision so they don't have to go to war. Nobody wants to go to war. Like, trust me, I've met a lot of like very senior people in like government, and like none of them are sitting there being like, I want to go to war. Whatever you kind of hear in the opinion of the news, like nobody really wants to do that. Like war is painful for everybody involved, especially people in the military. Like no general wants to go to war. Trust me. I've never talked to a general who's like, oh man, I really want to go to war. They think of their job as, I'm here to keep us out of war, right? And then if there is a war, to win it, right? That's how they think of their job. An intelligence officer thinks of it as like, I'm here to figure out what might go wrong so that I can give a decision maker like some options so that they can keep us out of war, right? That's where forecasting, that's where this can really help. And I think that goes for national security, of course, but for lots of other things. For businesses like hedge funds, like, yeah, sure, hedge funds make lots of, billionaires have more billions of dollars. They also manage pensions that we all have.
Yeah.
That just sort of, for better or worse, how the economy works. We have a pension, and that money is managed by somebody. And if they make bad decisions, you lose money. That's what happens if you have a 401k or whatever. Well, if we can help them make better decisions there, or if we can help a business not go out of business, especially a small or a medium-sized business where one bad decision really can put you out of business. When you're a startup, you make one bad decision, you go under, you go bankrupt, everybody goes home. We're all on unemployment now, right?
Yep.
And so if I can help people make those better decisions, and then even as individuals, right? Like we're not there yet, but I would love to get to a place where just as a regular person, I have this tool that is as powerful as all those advisors working for that president or that billionaire, right? To help me make a decision that to me is really important. Like, what college should I go to? Or should I buy a house now, or should I wait? I mean, for many people, that's the biggest financial decision they're going to make in their whole life, right? Is like when and how to buy a house. And a lot of times, frankly, you're like on your own. The first time I bought a house, like, my wife and I on our own, like nobody really to talk to. I would love to have had some tool to help me make that decision. And that's the tool that I want Vico to become.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I can tell you, having used it, it was incredibly helpful to know that it was bringing that, multiple viewpoints into that, what is possible, right? On the back end, just out of curiosity, how are those predictions happening? Because I did some predictions for kind of market stuff. I looked at an election here in Florida just to see what the outcome might look like. One had a very high score, one had a very low score. but I want to hear from the founder, like what's the science behind it?
Yeah. We, we, we take in a huge amount of data. So we pull from 150,000 different sources. So one thing that we're doing is that makes it superhuman in this sense is we're reading far more than an individual could read. And then what we've done is think about it like this. We've taken what the best forecasters in the world do in order to make a forecast. And then we've codified it and created a chain of reasoning of how do you predict things. So historical baselining of the information, running through scenarios and their probability, adding up different things that are for or against some eventuality happening, right? And there's a step-by-step process that we do, and it's very long and kind of complicated, but it's sort of common sense. It's the things that a perfect human forecaster might do. And that's what we've built. And so every time it's making a forecast, it's doing those steps perfectly, right? In a way that for people, we can't really do that.
Yeah.
It's really hard for a person, for example, to remove all emotion. Like you're thinking about a political election. We're just so inundated with political information, and even the best person, the most neutral, like you could take like a Tibetan monk, fully neutral, cannot fully remove their innate human bias in one direction or another. With the model, we can, right? We can remove those biases. We can remove all the rhetoric. That's why the model is actually very good at predicting political events, because it removes all the stuff, all the things we hear in the news, and like just looks at facts, right?
Yeah.
So that's really what it's doing. And then what it's producing for you is a percentage, right? The probability of this event. It also produces an explanation so you can see why this is happening, why it believes that to be the case. But at the end of the day, it produces a percentage. And when you start to think about the future as a percentage, that completely changes your view. Because instead of like all of us are like this, we have this kind of mushy qualitative view of the future. We think like, oh, this is more likely than that to happen, right? That's a normal way to talk about the future. But that's really different than saying, yeah, this is a 65% probability to happen. Or if I tell you, okay, a 52% probability of something happening and a 98 probability percent of something happening, two very different numbers. But if I explain it to you as like, this is what's most likely, you lose that gradation, right?
Yeah.
And those things. Or if I tell you something like this, last week, it was a 52% probability. Yesterday, it was a 60% probability. Today, it's a 65% probability. That tells you something really different. Now you're looking at a trend, and you're like, wow, this trend is going up. That feels important. It's that really helps you make the decision, because now you have some, you're explicit about these probabilities and you have exact numbers and a quantitative way to view what normally historically has been this really kind of vague, fuzzy way of thinking about the future.
Yeah, and one of the use cases that I found almost immediately is back to what you said. Housing prices have just been crazy, interest rates have been crazy. And so, looking at, what's the probability of interest rates dipping below a certain number? And it gives you a score, but then that score will update with time, right? And I think a lot of times that's where the human judgment kind of, you think about that, you make that intuition or based on whatever information you have at the time. And then you never go back and revisit some of those assumptions about that. And the market's changed and things are changing, and there's no way to keep track of all of that. So I love that it kind of gave you, it's like, okay, this is something that you care about. Let's keep track of this for a while and see if those change over time. Super
Exactly.
helpful. Yeah. So, like you said, I can make a better decision to say, okay, maybe I should hold off and not refinance right now, or hey, it looks like this might happen within the next year. You can plan around those things where otherwise, you're leaning on your financial advisor who it's their intuition too, or what they're hearing, through their own intelligence that they're gathering. It seems like a wonderful kind of neutral source for, having stuff that you care about and making decisions around that. So I love that part of it. So what's the future like for Vico? Where are you guys at now? Are you fundraising? What's been the hardest part of this journey for you?
We've raised some money through venture capital firms, so Crosslink Capital and some other firms came in and led. And really, when I went out, I only talked to friends, because I think you want to have a kind of trusted relationship with your investors. And we've been lucky to know great people. And then we've also been lucky that when we launched, we developed a great relationship with Bloomberg and have been hosting our forecasts, a series of them on the Bloomberg terminal. And we've expanded that now to host some indexes and things like that. That's gotten us out into the world of finance.
Mm.
And, our go-to-market is about first going to organizations for whom decisions matter a lot. And there are kind of two types of organizations that we think that matters. One is finance, right? Traders and banks and so forth, because a bad decision could literally mean millions or even billions of dollars. The other is national security, because bad decision could mean, literal life or death. And so, we launched on Bloomberg and started, working with financial services companies and buy side kind of hedge funds and traders, and sell side banks and analysts and so forth. So we've gone to market there, and we've gone to market with national security world, and we're doing work with the U.S. national security community, where that's important for me as well. From a mission standpoint, right? I want to personally help national security where I can, and we've done some really amazing work in there that I can't really talk about in detail, as you can imagine, but you can probably see how people in that world would care a lot about a capability that allows you to make better decisions, to look at, to forecast the future and make better decisions. So we're working with them. Over time, we're hitting our stride now, and we're kind of expanding into corporates and places like that. Think about a CEO or a chief strategy officer at a company that wants to make a decision about where to how to expand their business, or consultants that are helping them. So those are places that we're going to expand into. And, we'll look to, you know, we'll look to raise additional money as we take this to market, so that we can expand. And then, the biggest part, like when you're a CEO, is hiring, right? Like, you want to build this team, you want to build like that culture. And so we're hiring, we're building out our tech and engineering team. We have a sort of really unique and differentiated tech team, because, we've got guys who have backgrounds in AI research and, computer science. We have guys who have backgrounds in data science and statistics and that kind of area. And then, kind of uniquely, we have guys who have backgrounds in modeling and simulation and systems engineering. And so that makes it a really fun, like, engineering and developer environment, because it's like everybody's coming from this different perspective, and we're looking to grow the team in all those areas. And then, on the business side, growing out our business development team and operations and like kind of product management side as well. So definitely looking to hire guys and build out this team as we take it to market.
Well, you heard it. If you're out there, you're looking for some interesting work, Anthony is looking for talented people. So that's amazing, man. I want to just, you started with conviction, and you left a pretty big firm, like multi-billion-dollar firm, to go start Vico. So I got to imagine that it was something you felt pretty passionate that, this is what I need to go do. And my job at Bloom, we talk a lot about purpose, finding your purpose in the world. What would you say there's a lot of young people out there that are struggling to find, their thing. They're applying to lots of jobs. They're not hearing back. It's a very interesting disruption going on in the market. The jobs are coming, but during this period, there's some disruption. What would you say to them as they're, thinking about the future of AI, and maybe even starting a company? What advice would you give them?
It took me a long time in life to settle on something, you could say. And actually, if anything, I would say it's been wandering, right? I was in government doing a job. I left, I became an investor, and now I'm running a company. But to me, it's almost like a discovery of what really was important to me in each of those jobs, right? As I do it, I've realized I've built, it's like understanding of myself. Like, what do I really want to do? And sometimes you think you know what you want to be. And then you start to do that and you realize maybe it's something else. And, for a lot of people, myself included, at some point you say, I think it's just about money. Like, I just want to earn a bunch of money. And then you realize, and there's nothing wrong with earning a bunch of money. We should take care of ourselves and our families. Like that's great. But even when you're doing that, sometimes you realize maybe there's something more. And like that's really what led me to Vico to say, yes, I want to make some money. Like I have a family, I want to take care of them. But also I want that to have purpose and to be meaningful to me. And I want to build something. And a lot of my advice to young people is like, try to figure out what those things are almost through experimentation. Try it out. Go out there, swing the bat, try that job and see, is that the thing? And then if it's not, or if you realize as you're doing it, you want something else, pivot into what is. And over time, I think you'll get there, or you'll get as close as a person can get. Now, today, what's so interesting is that with AI, you can kind of just start doing these things yourself. You can build a one person company or product. You can kind of look, with my son and I, one of the things we're doing over the summer is he's not just playing video games, he's making video games. And that did not used to be possible, right? Unless you were some super genius, like you were not doing that. And now you can do that, and you can just say, and you could just try it out and be like, do I really want to make video games? Is this the thing I want to do? Or you can say, you can just go do it. And so, my advice is just go try it and do it. And you don't need a huge amount of money anymore to do that. You can just try it out. And in trying it out, you will figure out, is this the thing I want to do? And then, by the way, you'll also build up the experience. If you do want to go do it with other people, you're now going to walk into a company like mine and be like, I don't have a lot of work experience, but I built this thing and let me show it to you.
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And then that's going to help you get there. So I think it's just go out and do it, and think of yourself almost like a business that you can just go out and start making it yourself. And you're going to find your personal direction, but I think also your career direction.
Yeah, I love that advice. And I am living that. I was never a coder growing up, but I am having the most fun I've ever had building a company because I can do so much myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm building custom applications. I'm like, I really don't like what this does. I'm just going to go build my own local model of AI agents. So it really is. I feel like one of the things, if we leave on a positive note, AI has brought about, if Vico is democratizing intelligence, AI has democratized opportunity to do these types of things. The barrier to entry to start a company has never been lower than it is right now. So that is excellent advice. Just go do it. Try something out. And I love that idea of bringing something tangible. Say, hey, I don't have maybe a ton of job experience, but look at this amazing app I built. And that probably means more to you and any employer than anything they might put on their resume, right? So love that, man. Well, Anthony, where can people find you if they want to learn more? I know you have your book out, social handles. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to?
Yeah. Check out Vico at vico.io, vico.io, and check out me. All my social handles are at anthonyvinci.com, ANTHONYVNCI.com. And you can, hit me up on X or on LinkedIn from there. And check out the book, The Fourth Intelligence Revolution, The Future of Espionage, and the Battle to Save America. You can see it on my website or buy it on, any place that you normally buy a book.
Perfect. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to say thank you to all the listeners of the 50 Chairs podcast. being able to bring all of these guests who can share their expertise and advice as they've gone through their 50 Chairs moments has been a great joy and privilege. And if you're getting any value out of this, the best thing you can do to support our channel is to like us on Apple, on Spotify, or on YouTube, or share it with a friend who's going through their own 50 Chairs moments and needs to hear one of these stories. Thanks again for listening.